In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Mortal Shell 2 that was announced at Summer Games Fest. We had a lot going on with Nightreign during that period, so I didn't get to cover this game during that period. But if you're not familiar with Mortal Shell, it's a series created and developed by Cold Symmetry, and they surprised and blew us away with what they were able to achieve with such a small team for the first game. Cold Symmetry really nailed the aesthetics and feel of a dark fantasy world that's similar to Dark Souls or the Dark Souls franchise. And really the biggest complaint I had with that game was the combat wasn't that great, which we stated in our review. But considering what they were able to accomplish, I feel like their combat in the second game is only going to improve, and they've already nailed the atmospheric feel of the game, so I can't wait to see more of this. So to catch you up, if you've never heard of Mortal Shell before, Mortal Shell is a dark fantasy action RPG Souls-like game that offers challenging combat and a bleak dark setting similar to Dark Souls, but with Cold Symmetry's own unique take on the formula. In Mortal Shell, you play the role of the Foundling, an ethereal being with the ability to take control of the remains of fallen warriors. The game is a very solid Souls-like, which filled the void for many players between the period of Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, which there was a bit of a drought, delivering a similar type of experience to a lesser degree. From the look of the trailer, it looks like we'll be getting a much bigger project this time around, with the official website stating that the sequel will be a standalone project that greatly expands on the original, where you will explore a dense open world filled with dark secrets, strange companions, and loathsome foes. As I mentioned, Mortal Shell 2 is stated to be a standalone sequel, meaning it'll be okay to jump into this game even if you haven't played the first one, but in true Souls-like fashion, the first Mortal Shell delivered the story in cryptic dialogue and through obscure lore, which is one of the fun aspects of these games, where the community comes together to figure out what exactly is happening. Mortal Shell was set in a faraway, forgotten kingdom of Fulgrim, which soon became corrupted, and although it has not been stated officially, I think it's pretty clear that the sequel will be set in the same kingdom and will follow the events that transpired in the first game with the Dark Father and the Unborn. The trailer ends with an ominous command of sorts saying, "Bring the eggs back to me," and if the story from the first game is any inclination, something is probably after us and we're going to have to fight off this new threat. Without going into too much detail from the first game to avoid spoilers, it focused on undertones and exploring themes of corruption of faith, and the thin line between devotion and madness, and from the few dialogues we've seen in the trailer for Mortal Shell 2, it seems like that will continue to be the case. And Cold Symmetry has promised greater exploration through more shells and more stories, so expect to dig through a lot more than the first title. The first Mortal Shell game delivered a satisfying Souls-like experience, which was mainly carried by the aesthetics and theme of the game, accompanied by okay combat. Although the combat in the game was not terrible by any means, it was not the strongest aspect of the game, which is typical of Souls-likes if you've played any recently, except perhaps Lives of P and the recently released First Berserker Kazan. Having said that, the trailer for the sequel shows a lot of promise with the combat, as it does look like they've improved upon it somewhat. We get to see plenty of amazing looking finishers and shells that bash, stab, and punch monsters quite violently, strangely reminiscent of God of War-like finishers. The combat looks brutal and weighty and did not look at all floaty during the trailer, but we'll not be able to say for sure until we get our hands on it. One interesting aspect that stood out to me was they did not show the hardening mechanic making a return in the trailer. We get to see parrying using a parrying dagger of sorts, but there is curiously no hardening of the shells, and I wonder if they have reworked it or just removed it altogether, which would be a shame because it was one of the unique things about Mortal Shell. The lack of weapon variety was one of the weaker points of the first title, but I'm excited to see at least 6 weapon types in this trailer that range from one-handed axes to two-handed hammers, with at least 3 types of ranged weapons: a rapid-firing crossbow that shoots out monsters, a shotgun-esque type gun, and something that looks akin to a handheld ballista. This is a good sign that we're getting more weapon types, and I sincerely hope that there are a lot more weapon types that we haven't seen in the trailer yet. Moving on from the weapons is another cool aspect of the game, the different shells. It's quite clear that we'll still have the same shell system from the first game, where we'll have to inhabit the remains of a fallen warrior, and we'll be thrown out of the shell before we go down, and it will be interesting to see the same mechanic coming back with the addition of new shells. In the trailer, we're shown quite a few shells, and I'm confident enough to say that there will be returning shells from the first game, if not all of them. We got to see shells that looked really close to the Vassal and the Venerable from the first game in action, and while all the hooded characters can look the same in the fast-paced trailer, I think it will be safe to say that the Acolyte and the Deliverer are also making a return. We also got to see 2 new female shells, and I can't wait to find out what types of playstyles they will have. All these new shells and weapons are great, and it's something the game definitely needs, but they are going to be lost if the game doesn't have new enemy types or good opponents to go up against with them, And with that, you can see some pretty nasty looking enemies in the trailer. Of course, we have the regular armored knights with big swords to go up against, but we can also catch glimpses of some more grotesque and deformed enemy designs, ranging from a creature with tree branches growing out of its corpse head to mutated cultists giving me flashbacks of the Ouroboros virus-infected villagers from Resident Evil 4. This range of enemy variety is very exciting to see, and I'm excited to go up against weird and strange foes as I play across forgotten, dilapidated villages and kingdoms in my Soulslikes. Exploration was always a central part of Soulslikes, and judging from the footage we've seen in the trailer, we'll be getting a handful of different regions to explore, and I cannot wait to see what Cold Symmetry has in store for us this time around. Another point of interest to note is that they described the sequel as an open-world game, and at this point, we're not sure if this will truly be an open-world game or we'll be able to travel to different areas from the hub, but I'm sure we'll get more information as we get closer to launch, and I'm hoping to get some of these questions answered at Gamescom, which is just a little over a month and a half away. The first Mortal Shell game was built on Unreal Engine 4 and it looked amazing, and the sequel will be using Unreal Engine 5, which is known for its visual fidelity. If the visuals that we see in the trailer are any indication to go by, Mortal Shell 2 will look amazing, completely capturing the aesthetic of the first game and delivering a compelling dark fantasy world to experience with even better graphics. Although the trailer was not a pure gameplay trailer, but was directed and presented in a certain manner, it is evident that the footage that you're seeing is all in-game capture footage and not cinematics. The gameplay looked smooth and I did not see anything out of place. The visual feedback of hitting enemies and finishers and the attacks looked amazing, and the details of blood and goo spraying as you stab and maim enemies is spectacular. Also, it looks like Cold Symmetry is not trying to shy away from the gory effects, as well as we see a zombie get blown apart, completely cutting away his whole shoulder by a shotgun blast. In addition to the characters and combat animations, the locales and the environments look amazing as well, starting with the fog-covered swamp with ruins that just screams danger to what looks like snowy landscapes, abandoned castles, and tarry oil pits. The effects look amazing with reflections on the liquid surfaces with light rays coming in through the leaves of the tree. Although it's not been stated whether this game will be using all the latest bells and whistles of the Unreal Engine 5, such as nanites and lumens, you will undoubtedly need a powerful PC to run this game on max settings. Final thoughts. Cold Symmetry earned their place in the Souls-like world with the first Mortal Shell by not just successfully recreating a solid Souls experience, but also by putting their own fresh, unique take on the Souls formula, and I am more excited to see what we're getting from this studio, especially more Mortal Shell, with a full-blown sequel, since I'm confident they can improve upon what they already did with the first title. The biggest worry I have with this game is Unreal Engine 5, because it has notorious issues. However, improvements are constantly being made to the engine, and it is sort of a double-edged sword with mind-blowing fidelity. However, it does tend to suffer from performance issues, so we'll just have to see how that is as we get further into the development of this game. As of right now, we do not have a confirmed release date for the title apart from the information that will be coming in 2026 on PS5, Xbox, and PC on Steam, but you can go sign up for the beta testing on their website now if you want, and we will give you more information on the release date as it becomes available. As we said in our review of the first Mortal Shell, Cold Symmetry has laid a solid foundation for the franchise with an interesting setting and a very suitable art style that will fulfill the desire to explore a dark fantasy world. And if they indeed manage to improve upon their combat system, which was the weakest part of the first title, Mortal Shell 2 will reach even further heights than the first title. So that wraps up our preview on Mortal Shell 2. Did you hear about this during Summer Games Fest? Were you wondering why we hadn't gotten a video out about it sooner? I've been absolutely obsessed with Nightreign, as you might expect from our channel, seeing all the Nightreign coverage. But Mortal Shell has a very special place in my heart as a Souls-like. It was not the best Souls-like I ever played, but what they managed to capture with the atmosphere and the art direction was something that very, very few Souls-likes have ever captured. They managed to recreate that same feeling as if you were exploring Dark Souls for the first time, and even though the combat wasn't quite as good, you still had that sense of wonder as you made your way around the game map. And I really can't wait to see what they do in the second title, especially since they had like less than 10 people working on that first project, so they undoubtedly have more this time around, so they should be able to produce an even better product. What do you guys make of Mortal Shell 2? Are you guys happy to hear this announcement? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.